Good morning. This is called This Is Now Bridge to a Better World. I'm Teresa Mitchell. Ani is still out of the country. And there's a lot of news to talk about today. And of course, I have my rant. But I'd like to mention that today, Luigi Mangione goes on trial. That's something to watch. The latest lies from the Trump-Musk administration. They called Zelensky a dictator. They seem to be walking that back today. And in Ukraine, the Zaporizhia nuclear plant is, because of warfare, down to one lifeline. Nuclear power plants, surprisingly to many, have to have external power to guarantee their function should they need emergency services. Israel has dropped a leafleted extermination threat over Gaza. A very ugly thing and hardly a surprise, but in keeping with their genocide. Guantanamo, the U.S. illegally held base on the eastern side of the Cuban island, is now filling up with innocents who are deported and, of course, is being used as a threat by the Trump administration against everyone, basically. A U.S. district judge has ordered Trump to unfreeze funds again. He stopped short of saying he was in contempt of court, which is an interesting thing given the context. Trump making noises that he might ignore the courts. Perhaps this court decided to give him a little more time to think about that. And freezing funds, of course, is the order of the day. It's illegal. It's in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act and the separation of powers and a number of other things. But that is how sub-dictator Musk, or maybe super dictator Musk, is destroying the government. He is not, as I've mentioned before, Musk is not conducting audits. He is not producing efficiency. He is slashing and destroying, and I'll have more on his motives in a moment. Because of the turmoil at CDC, the news that bird flu has been detected in rats was delayed, so maybe I'll just say that now. Bird flu has been detected in rats. That can certainly affect your cat. We keep our cats in a catio or indoors. We don't let them out anymore. That's a whole discussion, but it's far too dangerous to everything, not just the wildlife. Kash Patel, the bootlicker for President Trump. I still have difficulty saying those words together. President Trump. May I speak to America for a moment? America, what the hell is wrong with you? Okay, now I would like to return to the regular audience. Kash Patel has been confirmed as the head of the FBI, which he said he would destroy, make a museum. And then at other times he said that he would use it to hunt down the opponents of Trump. And along those lines, Representative Robert Garcia reports that he has been threatened. He's been sent a letter threatening prosecution for denouncing Musk using the metaphor of a bar fight, which is just ridiculous. And he has right to push back. Of course, it's well within his First Amendment rights. And but Chuck Schumer got the same letter, and Chuck Schumer has apologized. He's very sorry. God, I hate that. And the famous footballer was arrested after denouncing Trump in a city hall, then laying down. And it's not surprising that someone would get arrested after laying down as a protest, as civil disobedience. But it's a hoot to see just how angry the guards are. Oh, my God. They are very, very angry. So, and finally, the Pentagon has pushed back on its cuts and delays. They said no. The Pentagon and the word power have a certain cachet, shall we say. And I'm really glad to see the Pentagon pushing back. Okay, you brass hats, let's see what you're capable of. You got some cojones in there in the Pentagon? Let's find out, shall we? I mean, for God's sake, let's find out. So there have been huge protests. I went to a protest with flags, American flags flying from my wheelchair. And, well, I'll just talk about more on that in a moment. Those of you who know me think that's pretty ironic, but I also thought it was pretty funny. Anyway, the USA is under attack, and it is under attack on the order of Pearl Harbor, and it is going to have more serious effects on an immediate basis. In Pearl Harbor, because it took a couple of months for the shock of Pearl Harbor to really reverberate through the USA, and when this reverberates through the USA, its intended effect is going to be horrible. But there has never been an attack of this intensity on the economy, the rule of law, and the general peace. And so I'm going to explain that in reverse order. First, this is an attack on the general peace because the progress that has been made in healing this society since the days as rape as marriage, indigenous genocide, and torture-based race slavery, in other words, DEI, is under steady, well-funded, and calculated attack. The wailing and snarling against diversity, equity, and inclusion is evil on its face, and as a matter of fact, as we have discovered in depth, it is Nazi. It is literally Nazis that have taken power. I mean, who the hell is against diversity, equity, and inclusion? Don't tell me the Trump voters are against it because first, they can't spell it and don't know what it means, and secondly, they're against it because Trump told them to be against it. Diversity, meaning the society is made up of all kinds of people, some of whom are not even men. Imagine that. Equity, the basic sense of fairness that tells you not to blow through the red light while others are crossing the other way because it's not your turn. And also, you might end up bleeding to death in the scrap heap that used to be your car. Inclusion, because even if you get around in a wheelchair, you could be, say, governor of Texas. DEI, inclusion, diversity, equity, inclusion. These are good things, of course. Of course they are. Anti-DEI is just another white supremacy trope. It's just white supremacy by another name. But it goes a lot farther than that. Even white people need to be treated fairly, and they sure as hell squawk when they're not. Or even if they think maybe somehow they're not even quite exactly fairly treated, though they can't quite cite data or otherwise put their finger on it. Anti-DEI means white snowflakes getting to feeling kind of melty at the thought that something needed to be done about centuries of wealth accumulation by sucking the blood of everyone else, except we don't want to talk about that, do we? Reparations, that's what anti-DEI is afraid of. Reparations. Reparations that need to be paid now. Reparations. If you want to frighten a white snowflake, yell, reparations. These are people who think psychoneuroendocrinology is a dance mix and that Marbury v. Madison is an online furniture store. But they do understand how a mean, sneering mob can get its way every time. I won't make excuses for the minority that voted Trump. They've blown through that privilege. Yes, they're stupid. And that means they won't fight against the loss of the rule of law. They think maybe it's a good thing since they decided in their jackass analysis, that is, DEI caused the economic bleed off of the working class since the 1950s. They think that's correct. They don't actually have a basis for that analysis other than brooding resentment and the effect of a loud demagogue telling them it is so. But they do know that they can't afford a new truck or even especially if they just bought one. So they won't risk looking at what Musk and Trump are actually doing. That's up to us. Rule of law means the Constitution means something. That was the effect of Marbury v. Madison in 1803, the Constitution that had been written within that generation. And there was some question as to whether that separation of powers business, specifically the power of judicial review, was going to be a real thing or just some stuff those guys wrote down at the Constitutional Convention in Philly. Separation of powers. Congress has the power of the purse and sets the usage of the nation's monies up to and including the prosecution of warfare. You must know this confidently to go forward. They set up their agencies to oversee their intentions, like the Department of Agriculture, Centers for Disease Control, Armed Forces, useful stuff like that. And then the executive branch sees to it that the laws are faithfully executed, including the laws that say, we decided to spend our money this way. Now, this doesn't mean that the Project 2025 loons who have infested the Capitol haven't come up with an excuse for putting all that power into the executive branch to with the presidency. They do it by grotesquely exaggerating the president's impoundment powers. You're going to hear a lot about the impoundment power as well. Impoundment means that sometimes some money needs to be set aside while in the process of executing the laws in good faith. Good faith is sorely lacking here. Trump's claim of legitimacy in these acts is a lie. I don't mean to imply that this is some mere ideological mistake. We are under attack from Christofascist, right-wing, Russian-directed incel billionaire oligarchs. This is a coup. This is why there have been so many lawsuits raised against the mass firings. The courts have the power under the Constitution to say whether the president is essentially acting in good faith as the keeper of those laws. So when Congress sets a budget, it of course includes the salaries of the people necessary to carry out good and useful duties like finding a cure for cancer, banking Social Security income and outflow and its trillions, preventing the distribution of bogus curative pills, and so on. So the courts have blocked the initial complete refusal of the Trump administration to spend anything at all. And as I mentioned earlier, they're still going back and forth on that. And the truculent Trumpers have responded by limiting the expenditure of any government credit card to $1. This is a gross defiance of the will and intent of the Constitution and the courts, because those cards in our modern era are exactly how Congress keeps track of much of the nation's expenditures. That's how they are tracked and regulated. They're put onto a computer by the usage of a little card from the General Services Administration. It's not an audit. It's not cutting waste. It's fucking up the whole government to create a crash, to create a crisis so that they can rule. Let me review what I've been saying here. I said I'd talk about the loss of peace. And part of that is saying that people like me are evil. That, I want to be rapey towards women or creepy towards children or something like that. Pretending that transgender people are a legitimate target instead of the smallest target that these cowards could find. I said I'd talk about the loss of peace, the loss of rule of law, and the destruction of the economy. This is exactly what is intended by Project 2025 and their hangers-on. Project 2025 came about because of the frustration of the technology plutocrat class. These people are insanely, obscenely rich. And as I warned, pardon me for saying I told you so, but for decades, I said that letting people have billions of dollars was causing huge intractable problems, and here we are. According to them, they don't have that money just because they lucked into being able to invest their father's money in internet-based technology at a time when it was accelerating beyond human experience. Oh no, that's not how they became rich at all. If you listen to them, to Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and all the other smug incel tech bros, no, they are certain they have all that money because they are that much smarter than anyone else. Now they go around stepping on their dicks and proving otherwise, but it doesn't prove it to them because this narrative is very strong in their little minds. They have been stamping tantrum angry that they haven't been able to rule us like dogs as they believe is their right. This is their big chance. That's what it's about. That's all it's about. Horrifying, scarcely believable, but there it is. So the first thing to do is to set us at each other's throats by insisting that all of humanity, except for white, straight, cis Christian men, caused our problems. That would be men caused our problems. So much for peace and the rationality it allows. The second thing to do is to shock the living crap out of anyone who follows current affairs at all by defying the laws, and particularly by defying the basis of all U.S. law, the Constitution. If I assign any brilliance to them, it is this. They understood that in a nation of employees, no one would resist their effort if it was conducted under the color of the presidency, the biggest boss. Americans don't understand that the presidency is intentionally limited by law. This is not a concept that they're able to bring their heads around, by and large. Maybe that'll change. So far, so good for them, and the task they are rapidly setting about now is the destruction of the economy. Super important for causing shock. Actually, they have already done that. It's just going to take a month or so for the real shock to cook in. I'll explain the destruction of USAID, for example, cut off funds. No, wait a minute, you're saying didn't the court tell them not to completely destroy it? But you see, they already have. It's a fait accompli, and this is a big part of their strategy. They have already interrupted its finances through the credit cards, I said, but also through just intimidating people with their hired goons. They ran people off, and cutting off USAID cut off funds to a lot of people. But let's look at the farmers who planted, grew, and harvested crops that are sitting in massive silos ready to be distributed to faraway countries. These farmers Those farmers are flummoxed at non-payment because they supported Trump, and they just didn't see this betrayal coming. You can find this on social media. You see these. How can this happen? I didn't vote for this, but they're not necessary to Trump and Musk now. Their hatred is not as relevant, and the election is over, and he doesn't give a flying what happens to them. The AP reports that 220,000 probationary federal employees have been axed. All of them were fired illegally, not just in face of separation of powers in the Constitution, but in specific violation of dozens of laws like the Administrative Procedure Act. Here again, many employees have gone to court, but they're locked out of their offices at the moment and won't be getting back in anytime soon. There are easily millions of people, from immediate family to local grocers and gas stations and utility providers, who are counting on those federal employees to spend their trillion collective dollars in the economy. All the Eco 101 wealth building that was done with that trillion has been cut off. All those mortgages are going to fail, banks are going to collapse, and that, again, was the idea. Hello, Tat. Hello, John. Hello, Ani. Glad you could join. I always enjoy the comments very much. So why is that the idea? Well, let's take Musk as an example. His first attempt to grow his pockets of blood emeralds money was as an online bank. He called it X. Surprised? It got merged with Peter Thiel's similar effort, which was rebranded as PayPal after Musk was fired for incompetence. He wants to have his own PayPal now, which is why he has been saying that X, the new X, should be an online payments bank. He can't just barge into the market with pesky financial regulators like the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau looking over his shoulder. So what did he do? He destroyed the CFPB. The FAA had an interest in all the little pieces of his exploding rockets, and he just knocked them for 6. See the pattern? How can the smiling man with his little boy on his shoulder be so evil? Well, for starties, if you like, he's literally a Nazi. He loves the letter X because it corresponds to 88 in the old computer code. That is to HH or Heil Hitler. His Doge website has little pro-Hitler dog whistles on it. 8 stars here and 14 cogs there on other iconography, but there's more to it than that. He loves Hitler. And how will he retain his parasitical billions if the whole society is non-functional? Well, there are 2 answers to that. First, it doesn't matter to him. He has billions. Do you think they're all in US dollars? They're around the world. A lot of it in Russia, a lot of it in China. He's been talking to Putin on a regular basis. He needs to be arrested for treason. He needs to be arrested. Arrest Musk. And we need to be loud in saying that and not intimidated by letters. I don't give a damn if I get a letter from the Attorney General myself. Arrest Musk for treason now. So it doesn't matter to him if you and I are begging for soup dregs in the streets now. Remember, we deserve it as excess and clearly inferior population. Second, he has invested billions in artificial intelligence, and he will be able to use AI-bloated algorithms to rule everything, I mean everything, and he'll be richly paid for that with your money. You won't have to pay it out in terms of employees very much at all because AI, of course, is within the computer. And against all this, yes, we have the courts. And no, we don't have, for example, Democratic Party leader Hakeem Jeffries, who seems confused about the whole thing and has taken to mounting pointless legislative attempts that he knows won't pass and whining that it's not his fault. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, on the other hand, seems to understand the jig is up. And AOC is explaining to her constituency how to stand up for their constitutional and human rights against the Gestapo-flavored immigration and customs enforcement goons. Bernie Sanders is touring the country to denounce the coup. Elizabeth Warren is on the telly explaining why Musk hates the CFPB. And more to the point, Reddit members created R5051. And if you search Reddit for 5051, you'll find more than one subreddit. They set up massive demonstrations this past Monday in 50 states, and they were impressive. And I was there and you were there. And so I have these recommendations to you. Get on Reddit and sign up for R5051. And there is also a website that is spelled out FIFTY dot ONE 5050 1.1. Ellen is so freaked about it, he already created a cadre of bots, to attack it. So, in all of this, I've said that we have our actions, and we have the courts, and we have a little bit of action in some of the members of the legislature. But we can't count on that. The outrage in the streets is literally important for driving the fight back. Outrage supports court action, and you'd think that it wouldn't, because the courts like to think of themselves as independent. Well, they've just discovered that they can be under attack too. They can be subject to calls for impeachment from the Trump-controlled Congress. So judges are just people as well, and judges need to, like the rest of us, put a wet finger up in the air and see which way the wind is blowing. And we had better make that wind blow our way. And we do that by attending demonstrations. Attending demonstrations is super important right now. How you do it is super important. Not bringing your phone at all to a demonstration is a tactic if you think that it is likely to be tracked, or if provocateurs are likely to be present so that you can be charged. And as I said, don't worry about that too much either, because they just can't charge all of us. They just can't. The Pentagon, as I mentioned, has been pushing back on civilian firings, and they are looking to see what the American people are saying. The corporate media doesn't want to cover our demonstrations, and that's why they're getting larger and larger. There are demonstrations coming up on March 4th. There are demonstrations coming up in April. And if you go to 5051, you can find the details on that sort of thing. If you are on Blue Sky, if you're not on Blue Sky, please go there. You can find me, Teresa58X, at Blue Sky. So wrapping up, thank you so much for tuning in. I did rather go on today. Thank you for your patience. And thank you for all that you are doing. I see that a comment says DJT and Musk going to Fort Knox is interesting. And, it's just going to be some sort of stunt. So we'll see what silliness they get up to. Please stay strong and know that Ani and I are here for you too. And our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea. Bye.